Hi everyone, I'm Chris. I'm here to talk to you about brand strategy. And as you can see from the title, I call it's more science than art. Because a lot of people, when they think about branding, they think of the creative aspects of it. Today we're going to dive into, that's while there is creativity, while there are artistic elements and such, that's not the main focus. We're going to go through a three-step process that I want to share with you tonight. So a little bit about myself. My background has mostly been in healthcare and technology. Right now, I'm currently a technology strategy director at Elevance Health, which is the new name for Anthem, or you might know it as Blue Cross or WellPoint, a health insurance company. Outside of this role, I do a bit of venture scouting, I do a bit of lecturing and other advisory roles. Before this, I was at UCLA Health on the strategic marketing team. And before that, I was at a couple more startup, small business type of organizations, a SaaS startup for community pharmacies, and a corporate spin out from a large clinic that had developed its own technology systems. So on the bottom right, you can see my contact information there. That website redirects to my LinkedIn. So if you want to get connected, that's where I am. Okay, so let's get into it. What is branding? I'm going to start with this definition that the purpose of branding or brand strategy is to advance the brand identity and equity, right? Philip, I saw you unmuted yourself. Did you have a question or something to say? No? Okay. So that's our North Star. Let's put it like that. We want to advance the brand identity. Whatever company you're building, whatever brand you're building for your products, all of your branding activities should advance that identity. They're not just, on the right-hand side, say, what is it not? What is not branding? Branding is not just slapping a logo on something and calling it a day. That's what a lot of companies do. And while a logo is part of how people know your company, it's not the end all and be all. Neither are using the colors, your official colors for your company or in your logo. Although over time, those can pick up, they can start to represent part of your brand there. Branding is also not just putting out advertising campaigns. Like you don't just put out some ads in your local newspaper or some digital ads online or social media ads and assume that, hey, we're done with branding here. That may be part of your marketing strategy and your whole portfolio, but that in itself may or may not advance the brand identity. You may think of some examples of bigger brand names where they put out an ad and it's it fails to resonate with the target audience or their target customers. That then doesn't reinforce the brand identity or the goodwill that their brand holds. And neither is branding just about free artistic expression. It's not just about people getting into a room and thinking of the most creative things they can do, whether for an ad or for some sort of collateral. It's, again, you can be remembered for the wrong things. So any tactic, any collateral, any materials that does not reinforce your brand identity is not effective branding. So we'll get into the identity part in a little bit, but does that make sense so far? Any questions there? Okay, so branding then is a very intentional activity. You need to have a clear strategy around it so you can build direction. You have a clear direction of where you're going and you're building momentum towards it. Again, if you're doing things and if you're saying that we are a very consumer-centric brand and you're doing everything around that, but then there are certain parts of your business that is not aligned with that identity that you put out there, that is harming your brand then, right? Some companies say that, hey, we're very innovative, but then the ways that they operate may be behind the times. That does not reinforce their brand identity. Some companies say we care about health, we care about the environment, but then they are polluting it, or they are, the example of pharmacies that continue to sell alcohol and cigarettes, right? Is it really about health and healthcare at that point? That compromises part of their brand identity, right? So again, branding or North Star is to advance that identity, whatever identity that you choose for your business may be. And I know that as part of this program, I was asked to speak a little bit about social entrepreneurship. I know some of you may have ideas that are not just, you're not just starting a business to make money, you're not just starting a business to make a name for yourself, but you're trying to improve the world in some way, some sort of service or helping profession, perhaps education, perhaps it's around improving the, your communities, perhaps it's about health. So especially for social entrepreneurs, I think having a clear direction, a clear strategy to build your brand is especially important. So today we'll talk about 3 steps. You'll see them on the bottom here: understanding your customers, developing your brand identity, and then designing that brand experience. So part 1, understanding your customers. First, it's not about your product. A lot of companies, when they are doing surveys, they're asking too much about their product. Like, oh, how would you use this product? What features do you like? What features do you not like? How do you find us? What do you like about our company? It's very, company centric, very centric around their business, very egocentric even. They're honing in on themselves and asking questions about themselves. And when you do that, you're not going to get, the right results or the accurate answers that you would like. See, the first part of starting to build your brand, especially for a startup company or a small business that is trying to find product market fit, you got to understand your customers. You got to understand what they're looking for, why they're looking for that, how they make their decisions. So, as I put here, you live and breathe your brand, your product, your company. They don't. So you don't want to fixate on these product-centric questions or these company-centric questions. You want to see how your product or your service would improve their lives, how it would fit into their workflow, how it would, whether it's a B2B or B2C product, how it fits into whatever they're doing. It's not about you, it's about your customers. So, start with that. The second point I put here about the belief dynamics, and actually a lot of these ideas I share come out of a book by a brand expert named Vince Perry. So if you want to learn more, I can share about that. But I learned this point from him here, especially around the it, me, and them belief dynamics. So it is like, let's say you're focused on the product. What do you like about it? How do you use it? When do you use it? With what people around you, or with in what circumstances would you use it, and when would you not, right? About the me dynamics, belief dynamics, is when somebody's using your product or your service, or how do they feel about themselves? You may think of, in other, especially consumer products, you're thinking of brands like Nike, like Apple, like Ferrari. When somebody's driving that car, wearing those shoes, listening to or using the iPhone and listening to their AirPods and such, it's not just about the features of the product or even the benefits of the product, it's how they look. How do they stand out to others? Especially when it comes to luxury products, jewelry, cars, and that sort of thing. And then, it's about how they feel about themselves. And then the them belief dynamics is how do other people view them when they are using those products or those services? On the product side, the cars are a classic example. When you're driving a Tesla, people view you differently than when you're driving, let's say, an Escalade or a Ferrari or something else. And if you understand your customers and you know what they want and how they want people to perceive them, that's how you can start to craft your brand identity, which we'll get to in the next step. And then my last point here, with some products, customers will never become raving fans. They're not going to go and shout it from the rooftops. They're not going to, go and tell everybody how great the product is. My experience comes mostly from healthcare, so I'll give you a healthcare example. Those pharmaceutical ads where everybody's super happy about their drugs, their laxative, whatever, they're dancing and singing about it. That doesn't really happen, right? In healthcare, which is especially different from some of those other consumer products we just discussed, with the consumer products, it's improving your life. It's taking it to a higher standard of living. It's a celebration of life. But with healthcare, drugs and such, for example, people don't use it because they want to. They're using it because they need to. It's restoring capability or health or something to them that they have lost because of sickness or disability. So in that example, they're not necessarily going to go and tell everybody about their or cancer medication. That's something that they don't want to talk about. But also outside of healthcare, we see this with a lot of B2B products too. People buy some sort of database tool from you. They're not necessarily going out there and shouting from the rooftops how great it is. They're just using it. As long as it works, they're happy. There's also a lot of tools that run behind the scenes. People don't need to know the name. Not everybody who uses it needs to know the name of your company and you and your brand. Only the people who are buying it from you really, really matter in that instance. So as long as they're paying you and buying your product, that's okay. That's good. So understanding your customers, effective brand identities, as put here, reflects the values and ideas that customers hold about themselves. Remember what we just said about those me, it, and them dynamics. How do they view themselves? How do other people view them when they're using that product or that service? So really, you want to understand their whole life. What are their habits? What are their values? What are their needs? What problems are they solving? What are their expectations of this product, of your service excellence, of everything that comes with it? It's a whole package. But what are their aspirations? What are you helping them reach? Or perhaps it's not solving a problem today, but it's helping to move them towards their future goals. So when you're doing some of this brand identity research, you want to understand not just what people buy or when or how people buy. You want to understand why they buy something. Why do they choose a brand? And depending on what it is that you're providing, whether it's B2B, B2C, whatever industry you're in, that may vary greatly. So there's not a single one answer. You got to do that customer discovery for yourself. The second point here is around focusing on similarities, not differences. And here's a key point to branding versus marketing. So when we're thinking about marketing, oftentimes we start with breaking down your market segmentation. Whether you're segmenting by age, by geography, by B2B versus B2C, by whether it's a subscription base or they're buying things a la carte and such. You're segmenting it, right? In branding, the difference is how do all of these segments, or why would all these segments gravitate toward your brand? The best example I can think of here is comparing it to a sports team. You go and watch a Lakers game or a Dodgers or Angels game. People in the fans, the people who are sitting and watching the game, they're all ages. There are various ethnicities, religions. They come from different places, different nationalities. They speak different languages, but there's something that draws them to this game and especially to this team. They all consider themselves fans of this team for whatever reason, right? What is it about your brand that brings these different segments together? Because in your marketing, you'll segment and you'll speak the language that each of these people speak. You'll use a messaging that works for each of their groups. But overall, your brand identity for your company needs to be something that draws them together. And then lastly, it's around asking the right questions here. Asking the questions, again, understanding their life. How does all of this fit into their lives? What are the things that make them tick? And then also, you may get these focus groups together. You may simulate. You're not just necessarily asking direct questions. You may be facilitating conversations, and you're listening to those conversational cues, the words that they use, because a lot of the ways that they describe themselves, their needs, and how they interact with one another. Again, I work in healthcare, so while sometimes you may sell and you want to get a bunch of doctors in the room because you're selling to these doctors, that may not be the right mix there either. Perhaps it's a more cross-functional kind of situation where you have some administrators, some doctors, some nurses, some pharmacists, and as they're talking about these topics, these problems that they're solving, you're listening to the ways that they interact with one another. And some of those words are what would be core to your brand. Why are they gravitating towards your brand? And it really speaks to the problems that they are trying to solve and what it is that they hold most dear to them. So first step, we talked about understanding your customer. Now let's get to the second part. Second part, really, we're talking about developing that brand identity. And I love the way that Vince Perry puts it here. Brand strategy is like knife skills. There's one best way to dice onions. Cooking So cooking is like promotional tactics. That's a creative act. But prepping food to be cooked, like branding strategy, is an established practice. Don't get creative with it. Again, one best way to dice onions. So this is again, more of a science than an art, more of this practice or this process. So brand identity, we can break down into two distinct parts: brand promise and brand personality. Now, there are a lot of agencies and people out there who, they have all these different things, brand essence, brand ladder, there's all these different frameworks and such. But at the heart of it, really these two things, I believe, are what you really need to hold on to. Everything else is kind of a remix or a mishmash of these. So you want to come up with these. We're going to talk about them in the next slide, and then vet all your materials against these two to see if it is aligned with your brand, the brand identity that you're trying to advance. So developing your brand identity, these two parts, the brand promise is that commitment that you're making to customers, such as the benefits that the brand offers. Again, we're talking about social entrepreneurship in particular. So there must be a lot that the businesses that you're building is going to help improve in the world, or at least in your community, for those people in your target segments. And when you're trying to come up with this promise, it's here's a good framework to look at it. You want to remove subjectivity to it. You want, this framework, the acronym is SCORE. So if let's say you're getting your team together, all your stakeholders are represented. You have these customer insights that you've gotten through your brand identity research, and now you're synthesizing that information and coming up with what is this brand promise that is going to draw these people to you. So you can you can brainstorm, you can start putting things against a wall there, but you want to vet them and see, is this sustainable? Is this credible? Is this ownable? Is this relevant to people? And is it exciting? And this is a good framework to start vetting that brand promise, because there may be things that you're saying about your brand, but it's what every brand out there said, every competitor of yours is saying about them. So it's not really ownable. Or maybe you're saying it and it is something differentiated for you, but it's not particularly relevant to your customers. Again, you don't want that, right? You want something that your business can uniquely own and sustain, and you have proof for it. It is credible, and it is something that invigorates the people in your target segments. So then the next part is around coming up with that brand personality. So while the promise is kind of like your mission statement or your value proposition and such, the personality is, how does that get expressed? How does it get delivered? What is the attitude or the tone with which your brand shows itself to the world? There are brands out there that are very formal, traditional. You think of the banks, the hospitals, very conservative brands for a reason, right? You don't want one that is perhaps too creative or wacky or out there that may not draw as many customers. Meanwhile, there are other brands that put themselves out there as being the challengers, the innovative ones, or others where they're very informal. Very you think of all those memes about I think it's Wendy's and some of the fast food chains on social media. That is the image that they're putting out there. Now, whether that really reflects that brand that they have built over the years is another story. But what is that personality that you're delivering everything, all your interactions with your customers and with the public? What does that look like? So this is good to come up with 3 to 5 traits, personality traits here, that will inform the way that you come up with your visual, verbal, and even behavioral expressions of that brand. So, a couple last notes here. You don't want to wordsmith by committee. You want to get your team, all the right stakeholders in the room and come up with some of this. But at the end of the day, if you're the founder, I believe you and perhaps 1 or 2 wise counsel people on your teams should drive that forward, and then have that be this is the brand that we're delivering to the world there. Okay, so once you have your brand promise and that brand personality, now it's time really to design. And this is perhaps the fun part, the part that many of you may look forward to, or perhaps you've already started with it. those visual and verbal assets from that brand promise and brand personality. You're thinking of your logo, your taglines, the fonts that you use, the colors that you use. What are those secondary hallmarks? Perhaps it's you have a lot of things that are parallel lines or curves or design elements that may not be necessarily in the logo or in represented elsewhere, but once people start seeing that shape or that pattern, whatever that may look like, they start associating with your brand. And then you can start developing things like a style guide. You're codifying, this is the way that our brand should look. This is how we use our logo. This is how our banners should look. Perhaps your logo has a vertical or square one, and then a longer one with your company name. This is how you use the colors. When you use the light color, this color on a dark background, or vice versa. What fonts are for your headers as opposed to the body text. All of that can be codified in your style guide. So then you have a consistent delivery of that brand personality. Everything that goes out people can look at it and then they're like, oh yeah, they associate it with your brand. And then you can also come up with templates. I think that's always helpful. There's certain documents where you're going to use a lot of it, or email blast or whatever, your letterhead and other things like that. Okay, so last point here, besides that verbal and visual elements of your brand experience, at the end of the day, it's really about how you interact with your customers and the world and that behavior. So it starts with culture. There's a good book out there called Fusion. It's about culture and brand and how that fits together. But basically, you can't fake it for long. Like if you say you're an innovative company, but internally you're doing things that are uninspiring, not very innovative at all, you're going to draw the wrong people to work for you. You're not going to deliver on that innovative vision or that innovative the way brand identity. And then if you're talking about social entrepreneurship, improving the world, having values that that are good for humanity in the way that you view it, it needs to be consistently practiced and reinforced. Inconsistent actions both within and out, internally and externally, that will compromise the way that your brand is known. And really, you can't just have lip service around it. A lot of big companies, they say, hey, we care about we care about the environment, or we care about racial equity, or we care about this or that social cause, and they're trying to do all this PR around it. But people see through those thin veils if there's no substance behind it. If these companies are continuing to pollute the environment, if they are not treating their employees of different minority groups fairly, and other things like that, it doesn't matter what you say about yourself. It's what you do that really is how you are known, both as an individual and as a company. So it's helpful also to map the different touch points of your customers and then develop those standards. What are those sacred things in your company? If you're an employee of this brand, what does that mean to, what does that mean? How do you interact with customers? What level of autonomy or what level of autonomy and service will you deliver? What are those standards for your employees and for those who work with you, who are representing your brand directly or indirectly? They need to be a part of it also. So I'll sum up with this quote on the right-hand side by Vince Perry. Those branding hallmarks signal a brand's intention. You think of the visual and verbal elements, what you say about yourself, all of that. It's your intention. But over time, a brand's identity is a sum of what it says, does, and how it behaves. So understand your customers, develop that brand identity, and then you can design that brand experience. Thank you. Now I take questions.
Thank you so much, Chris. That was really helpful. I really enjoyed it. I saw we have a chat in, as well as I will say, for those of you who have questions, please unmute yourself and ask away.
Hey, Chris, this is JJ.
Hey,
How you doing?
JJ.
Yeah. So we're increasingly digitized.
Hmm.
And what my favorite to hate is AT&T. So when I have a problem, I want to solve it. And it's chat, it's FAQs, and
Hmm.
there's a lack of human touch to it. How do you what does that do to your brand?
Yeah. So first, I relate with you with the AT&T experience as well. I actually have a screenshot I'll share with you later. It's a hilariously terrible customer experience that I had with them once. But the question around AI and chat bots and such, I so my bias is that I believe in good customer service, and I'm not saying that AI or chatbots are all bad per se, but I would say that so far, much of my experience with them has been less than stellar. And let's put it this way: whenever I've interacted with one of those or a phone tree, press one, press two, I'm trying to get to a human as soon as possible to explain whatever my situation or concern is. I've never had the experience where it's been the opposite, where I'm talking with a person, I want to get to a chat bot or AI, right? So, let's start with that. But I think it really depends on what what that chatbot or AI is trained to do, and what is the purpose for it, and that may fit also into the type of business. So, sure, there may be a lot of very common questions. You're looking at you're mapping out all the questions that you're getting from customers, and you're doing a Pareto chart, and you see, hey, 80% of the questions come in, are one of these things. Sure, you can do an FAQ, a chat bot, or something that easily, quickly gives people the answer, or even, press one, press two on your phone tree and quickly gives people the answer they need. Then I think that's fine. The people will move on with their lives once they get their problems resolved. But in the instances where it would help to have a more human touch to it, more sensitive subjects, or where, again, I work in healthcare, and a lot of people calling in for, whether to their insurance or to their provider, they want to talk with a human being, somebody who can relate to them, somebody who can help solve their problem, but also empathize with them along the way. And I don't believe that in some of these industries where we're getting rid of staff in favor of some of these digital tools, that it's I don't think that's helpful.
Yeah, my take is what the automation cannot offer, at least today, is empathy. And when I reach out to a provider, to a company, it's not just a chat. Usually I have a problem that I'm trying to fix, and a little bit of humanity would help me de-escalate and
Mhm.
feel better. So I'm really tortured by the benefits of automation. The cost reduction is obviously the motivation, but
Right.
the limits of it and how that impacts your brand. So
Yeah, I think it's in some ways diametrically opposed to some of what we're telling people, training up people to have more empathy, have more of those soft skills, have more of the cultural competencies that we often talk about, right? Well, the chatbots, at least so far, they don't have that, and they will never have the real empathy because they are not human. They can't really relate in that level. They may answer all the questions and get you the right answers, but um, and I've seen some of those where they sound more polite. So some of the chatbots sound more polite than others, but to me, that's still not real empathy because
yeah,
they're not, they're not human.
I was just going
Uh,
to go ahead, Philip.
oh, no, go, please
This,
continue, JJ.
this is simple. So I just did the drive-through at Chick-fil-A.
Hmm.
And, you know, there's kind of a long line to get through it. And the attendant walks up to me, and rather than saying, may I take your order? She says to me, and how are you today?
Mm.
And what a nice personal touch. And to be perfectly candid, this was my first experience with Chick-fil-A. The food's
Oh.
okay, but the service was exceptional.
Mhm.
And boy, does that give me a positive feeling about the brand. So
Yeah, I like when they say my pleasure as well.
Mhm.
And when
yeah.
it's a really nice touch.
Yeah, and I think that's partly, that how the brand personality is to be delivered, and then also the standards, the language that they use, right? I have some friends who used to work there, and for example, like you said, they say "my pleasure" instead of just "you're welcome" or "of course," and they say "may I refresh your beverage" instead of "hey, you want more to you want to refill," right? So there's things that. And like you said, JJ, like, how are you today? Not just like, what do you want?
Yeah.
So it's all part of the brand experience there.
Others in the audience, if you have questions, you can unmute yourself and ask away.
I was going to also say, your comments about healthcare. So generally, when we're talking with a healthcare provider or an insurance company, it's based upon, to generalize, illness. Okay, maybe preventative maintenance, but it could be you've had a problem. And right up next to AT&T, for me, are the healthcare companies. And it's the attitude that they communicate about treating your healthcare problems. So I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I just toss that out there. So
Yeah, I think there's definitely room for improvement at most, just very generally speaking, most healthcare organizations, whether insurance or providers and such. I think one example around that is, um, I don't have the statistics off the top of my head, but basically, doctors who have good bedside manners tend to be sued less than doctors who have poor bedside manners. The quality of the outcome, patients may or may not, like that doesn't make a huge difference, right? You may have less than stellar quality, but your doctor was really nice to you, you're probably not going to sue them. Versus you had like okay, but like something went wrong a little bit, but your doctor was a jerk. So suddenly people are very happy to,
and related to that would be there's a doctor you go to, she has good bedside manner, and you're appreciative of their expertise, but their front office is horrible. They can't keep the appointments straight. They're obviously stressed. Maybe they're overworked, and whatever brand equity that doctor has, it erodes because of that front office. So
yeah, it's definitely everything about the business, right? Your people, process, technology, and if your people are not delivering that brand, if your processes are hindering your people from delivering on that brand promise or personality, that certainly affects your that brand equity. I think continue that that example. That's why social workers, especially medical social workers, uh, it was put to me this way by an executive once. There's like a good social work, like, they prevent the need for lawyers. Let's because typically they're helping to organize everything and they're treating the family well. You prevent a lawsuit down the line if you have a good social worker.
yeah, I agree. And the thing that I tell my students, I should disclose to the other folks on the call that I teach entrepreneurship and marketing at Cal State Fullerton, but it's the whole of the experience, right? So it's like when you walk into Little Caesars, it's how it smells. Is it clean? How are you greeted by the person behind the counter? Does the food taste good? Is it packaged well? Is it hot? You know, all those things combined. That's the total brand story. And it doesn't take too many weak links in that chain to disrupt the brand experience. So,
right. And again, I think it comes back to knowing your customers and what their expectations are. You know, Little Caesars is not the same as, let's say, Round Table Pizza or like a smaller mom and pop artisan pizza kind of place, right? In the same way that McDonald's does not have the service excellence of Chick-fil-A, but they're or I guess for a burger place, maybe In-N-Out or whatnot, but then they're catering to a different audience with different expectations. Walmart is not Nordstrom, but people go to Walmart because of what it is. Nobody's expecting Nordstrom level service at Walmart, or vice versa.
I agree.
Hi guys. Do you mind if I ask a question? Sorry, I just let me get my video on. Yep. Oh, hi, Christopher and John. I'm actually dialing in from Australia, so this might not, this is just more of a general question. And I'm sorry, Philip, I missed the first part of the presentation because I was tired on a conference call. So I'm hoping to be able to get the recording later. But Christopher and John, I just got actually a live example. We're kind of in the process of building a boutique brand for our vineyard. So we got a vineyard here in Australia, and we're making fairly good quality red wine. But our problem, of course, is that we are one of thousands of small vineyards in Australia. They all have their own, batches of wine of varying quality. And I'm just wondering, if you got any advice on how do we make ourselves stand out amidst the sea of brands you can find in the supermarket, and also of course, being a small vineyard and all, we don't have the same marketing budgets as some of the bigger corporate vineyards have. So is there any, do you have any particular strategy in that kind of context, in order for us to have a low cost method of getting our brand out there, and sort of standing out as well, because if you go to the supermarket over here, it's just got like thousands of brands, literally.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Sam. Without knowing more about your vineyard, your business, or your customers, is there like what is your main differentiator from these other vineyards? And maybe that's not as clear cut, but like, is there an angle? Is there something to your story? Is there something that just stands out, whether it is about the product itself or about you, or the history of the vineyard, maybe something like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, luckily we are located in a very good region, the wine producing region in Australia. It's in South Australia, which is it's called the Barossa Valley, which is the premium wine producing region in Australia. It's similar to, I guess, the Napa Valley in the US. So if you say Barossa, if anyone knows about Australian wine, straight away they know the Barossa. So like that is the starting point. But then there's a lot of wine producers out of the Barossa as well, right? Many of them like us, small family-owned vineyards, producing relatively small batches of wine. Quality-wise, we have good ratings from wine critics, and we made a couple of publications this year based on quality, right? Because they're quite selective about what they put in. We were reviewed and rated by Decanter, which is like one of the premium wine publication out of London. We haven't started the actual, like, we haven't gone into the competitions and the tasting. There's all this thing we can spend money on in order to do it. But so in terms of basic, we do have a quality product from a good region, and it's just a matter of getting that message out. as to because just to take a step back and give you an understanding of the market at the moment in Australia. Like once upon a time, we used to do really good business with China. I mean, they buy Australian wine at volume and at premium, which is, it's like the unicorn. You get a market that buys buys products at a premium price, but at volume as well. But because of recent politics, international politics, the Chinese have stopped buying Australian wine, and so there's a glut of very good quality wine in Australia, and regardless of whether you're premium or not, everyone just buys it at the same price, because there's so much of it, and people have to keep selling the stock regardless of pricing, because of course next year that's the harvest, and then you make more wine, and it just keeps going, right? I mean, so say if you don't sell your vintage this year, of course you can warehouse it, but then you're just adding more stock, and everyone's doing the same thing, right? So at the moment, the Australian market is looking like it's a price taking market for sure. Whether you're a premium wine or non-premium wine, you don't really have much say in terms of price setting. So I was just wondering, is it worth, like, should we just basically sell it at whatever the market will take, or actually try to have a brand strategy and try to differentiate ourselves from the rest of the market? But that's basically the context, the background to our predicament at the moment.
Yeah,
Chris,
I
if I
think.
can, go ahead, sorry.
To be quick. One, I think obviously it sounds like if you had a brand that stood out from all the other ones, that would be valuable. But that aside, I think, and JJ, let me know your thoughts on here too. But I think maybe it's a distribution. Maybe you're differentiating yourself by where you're selling, or to whom you're selling, right? Like personally, I don't know very many Australian wines. I think here, we have our very typical California, Italian, French, and so some other places. I don't know Australian wine, and I'm not a caveat. I'm not a big wine drinker myself, but I just haven't noticed many of those there. I think if you distribute it to places where, and perhaps to people who want to try something new and different, I think that could be. If that's your target audience and you're seeing what makes them tick, what's making them choose something new and different, and that could be helpful. What are your thoughts, JJ?
Yeah, I think your comments about looking for a differentiator, a unique characteristic, and then focusing on that, I think that's spot on. The challenge is there are hundreds and hundreds of brands of Australian wine, and it'd be easy for many of them to kind of say the same thing. Hey, we're a quality wine, we're from this region, our reviews are excellent. So to me, maybe what really counts is the story. And that is whether it is the winemaker, the characterization of the winemaker, the winery itself, something that emerges as memorable, and that the customer would value and retain. Because the first goal in marketing is to be remembered. And for instance, we have a large retailer of wine and spirits in the US called Bevmo. Maybe you have as well. But you walk down the wine aisle, and there are 1,000 Cabernets.
Exactly, that's exactly it. How do we stand out? Yeah.
But if I have an image in mind of a certain brand, of a story, I will hunt it down. So I don't know what your story is or what it might be, and whether it is romance, if it's a cartoon, but something that really pops. That's how I'd look to differentiate.
Yeah, I think regarding the story, one of the brands that in alcohol, for beer, not wine, is Dos Equis, right? The most interesting man in the world campaign. That kind of skyrocketed their popularity. And I think that one, you're familiar with that, Sam?
No, unfortunately not. If you could just briefly take me
It's
through
like
that. Yeah.
if you search it up, there's like all these commercials where it's like this older gentleman, and there's like all this so crazy stuff happening where he's like, I don't always drink beer, but when I do, I drink Dos Equis, right? And it's like there are so many beer companies out there that are so much more established than they were at the time, but that's how they got through the market, because it's very different than all the other beer companies that were like, oh, drink a beer for every celebration, right? It's like, oh, find your beach or find your whatever, and everybody's drinking beer all the time.
Yeah.
It's like I don't always.
That's a perfect example, Chris. That is a perfect example.
So is that done through what kind of advertising channels? Are you just social media or?
So it was television, I would say, first and foremost. And Dos Equis is a Mexican beer. And when I was in college, it was like last choice. Mexican beer, oh no, we don't want that. Today, it is first choice. And the image of the most interesting man in the world is pervasive. Now they spent a lot of money, and they did a lot of competition, but the story of it is just incredible.
I see. I was just creating a good story that people can remember.
There's a lot of difference to contest. There's a lot of wine expos throughout the country, and maybe if you're saying morning, you can make a trip to Australia or whatever. Some of these places they'll do stuff like that out here in California. So I live in Marietta or Temecula, and it's the little hometown feel. If you want to go to the wineries, they're there. But I'm sure there's tons of people who want to go to that.
I see. So it wasn't very clear. I think there's something wrong with the line. But is it Gladys? Gladys, just to so that I understand your point, it is about exhibitions, about events where you're out there promoting.
Yes. So you're going to the Las Vegas Expo, or you going to the Maryland, related to commercial services, working with general services. You might want to look into that and connect. But that's one of the ways I do work that industry. I've worked with Costco, trying to bring them a what do you call it, a mezcal, not a tequila, but a mezcal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, on that note, and also following on what Christopher said before, like just because people are not familiar with Australian wine, like, do you think there's a market in the US for Australian wine?
Yes, there is, because people seem to get hung up on where the wine's from. Like,
they do. Okay.
But there's like they're saying it has to have a story. Is it somebody that works there? Is it the founder? What is it? What is their level of expertise, or is it like family 4 or 5 generations back and there's a story? Okay, then oh, okay, oh wow, it's a family. Oh, it's a this. It's tied to what? What is the gimmick?
I see. Yeah. So that's good. So and just as a general question, where does Australian wine rank in the grand scheme of? Obviously, you have your Californian wine in America, and then I think Christopher mentioned Italian and French. I mean, those are the kind of the old world wines. And then you got Chileans, South Africans, and
my cousin's niece or daughter. Or whatever, her husband is bringing Australian wine to Mexico, and his focus is plugging it down there. But I don't know why they're going all the way to Australia, but every now and then they go to Australia and other places to promote the wine. but their
I see.
focus is Mexico because they're saying
Mexico, okay.
nobody has Australian wine down there. Oh,
Mhm.
okay. Well, I don't know. Why is Australian wine so great in Mexico? I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I'd
No,
I'd have to ask them what's so
yeah,
great about
yeah.
it.
No, that's really interesting because I mean that we tentatively looked at the US and Canada as potential new markets. This is after the whole China experience. So we're trying to diversify our export, the export possibilities. But never really thought about Mexico. But you've got me thinking about. I mean, something to look into.
Yeah,
I guess.
down in
Yeah.
Baja, there's a place called Valle de Guadalupe, and
Mm-hmm.
there's
Yep.
tons of wineries down there, and people go during the weekend and go party hard down there, and
Oh,
they go to
okay.
the different wineries down there. I myself have never gone, but
Mhm.
I hear people from here, oh, we're going down there. Oh, okay, well, good luck. Have fun.
Yep. Gotcha.
Okay,
No, that's really good insight, Gladys. Thanks for that.
sure. I appreciate
Yeah,
to
really
add
appreciate
value.
that. Yeah. Yep. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. I think that's also my question. My question is how does a small vineyard like us stand out in a sea of brands? Um, but that's really helpful from everyone. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and Sam, by the way, one of the things that we do in terms of our lean startup is we kind of take more of a systematic approach and really testing. And so
Mhm.
we like to do testing, and whether that be testing, in one setting and then come back next week and see the results and measure the results, designing another test. It could be sequential. It could be at the same time. At the same
Yep.
time, usually that's called A/B testing.
Mhm.
And you can launch those different campaigns on social media. For example, you could set it up into a something called the CBO, where Facebook's algorithm will say
Yep.
this ad has been served to so many people, this ad has been served to so many people, but there's more click-throughs here, and so it actually takes that budget and it actually reallocates it to the one that's performing better, and then it serves it to more people. So there are different strategies you can use, but
Yep.
testing is the way to go. It's not so much of a hunch, but testing. And we like to also incorporate, before going into stores and just putting it out there, that you talk with a lot of different people. And so, yeah, we can talk more offline about how you
Absolutely.
can go
Yeah.
about through that. Yeah, awesome.
Absolutely. I think I'm connected to you on LinkedIn, so I'll definitely be in touch. Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, Philip.
Great.
Appreciate that.
You're very welcome.
Yep.
Any other questions at this moment from anybody else in the audience?
If I already have my deck, then do I just submit it to you? Then you critique it. Then I obviously engage you, do the fee. If I need to raise a portion of capital for an infrastructure fund, then would you help me? Because there's a lot of sharks out there, and there's some people who want to take the patent or take too big of a stake in my deal. Is that kind of where you kind of help with that process, so I don't end up with a shark absorbing the majority of the company?
We would definitely take a look at your deck and give you advice. And the right kind of investor is an accredited investor. And the accredited investor, usually they have to meet certain milestones, like they have to have a net worth of over $1 million. They usually have to have an income stream of somewhere like $200,000. They're not really the shysters out there, the accredited investors. And what they're really looking for is they're looking for a team and a real executed plan. And what they really want is, of course, they want their money back and then some, but they're not really looking to so-called steal an idea. You know, if you were to talk to someone who is not an accredited investor, you know, you might have a different situation, but a real investor really wants to invest in you and get money back.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you can send it to me. I put more information into the chat, so including my direct email. So you can go ahead and email me that.
I might as well comment on the comment I made in chat. So I have a buddy who owns a winery for 35 years, and he made sparkling wine, champagne, Pinot, Chardonnay. He made everything. And what he tells me is once you get the chemistry down, you can make them all if you really want to, right? You might, but what he ended up doing is he quit providing wine to local retailers, and he had an e-commerce site. He shut that down, and he chose to specialize, in ports, and which are generally speaking, a dessert wine, a sweet wine, right, after dinner wine. And today he has more varieties of port than any winery in the US. And his brand in the US is known specifically for that. So are his ports good? Yeah, I think they're pretty good. Are they the best? Well, probably not. But his reputation is the go-to winery for ports. And so simply by specializing, he created a differentiator in the marketplace. So maybe not what you intend to do, but it just could be an option. So
yeah, thanks. Good point there. That's a great point. We haven't really looked into anything beyond, you know, your traditional range of wine. We might move between Merlot and Shiraz and CSUF, for example, but we haven't gone down that path of specialization.
I look forward to a tasting. So
yeah.
Thank you, Philip.
Okay. Well, with that, I just realized that we are at the top of the hour, a little bit over. So I want to say again, thank you, Chris. This has been wonderful. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for all of you for attending. Really made the discussion, the Q&A lively. And I think we got to answer some of those questions in there too. So I think this is a really productive event. And again, thank you, Chris. Much appreciated. Really stimulated a lot of our thoughts.
Yeah, glad to have helped. Thanks, Philip. Thanks, JJ, and thanks, Sam, for your questions. Good luck with the winery.
No worries. Do you mind if I add you guys on LinkedIn?
Yeah, go for it.
Please do.
Yeah, okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I will put my LinkedIn in here as soon as I can copy and paste it.
Yeah.
Let's see. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to multitask and say we are having every 2 weeks we're having a guest speaker, and so in about 2 weeks time from now, same bat time, same bat channel, we are going to be having a speaker, and I can pull up the information on who that is in just a moment. You are all welcome to attend. It is going to be great, as we always have great stimulating conversations. And if I can put that also into the chat as well. In 2 weeks time, we're going to be having Sean Sanders talking about be understood and get funded. So
Gladys might want to listen to that one.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Gladys, mark your calendar for next Wednesday at 6 o'clock. 2 weeks.
What's the next topic? Sorry, did I miss that?
Oh yeah, it's called Be Understood and Get Funded.
Oh, nice one.
It's about pitching your idea and finding the right fit of investor.
Mm. Oh, that would be useful. Yeah, definitely.
And June 14th at 6 p.m. Pacific time.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Perfect.
Thank you all. All right. Looking forward to connecting later. Take
All right.
care. Have a good one. Bye-bye.